Hello and welcome. I'm Trisha Edwards, Deputy Director of Smithsonian Affiliations, and I'm so glad to have you all with us today. We're pleased to welcome you to our program, Collecting American Elections. The artifacts that the Smithsonian collects around campaigns going back to 1789 are a fascinating record of American political history that provides insight into how our nation grapples with issues, attitudes, and culture over time. There is much we can learn, reflect on, and even laugh about looking through this treasure trove, and that's what we'll be doing tonight. We'll look back at the buttons, banners, swag, and more that filled America in elections past, and what they tell us about the nation we continue to build together. I'm looking forward to what I know is going to be an interesting, thought-provoking, and certainly timely discussion. Before we get started, we have just a few housekeeping items. This program is being recorded. The link will be posted on the Smithsonian Affiliations YouTube page in the coming days. If you have comments, please use the chat box, and I'm glad to see there's already so many great comments. Be sure to send your comments to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your comments. If you have questions for our presenters, please enter those in the Q&A box. Our staff will be monitoring both the chat and the Q&A. And please note that while on-topic discussion is encouraged, we ask that you express yourself in a civil manner and treat others with respect. The Smithsonian monitors comments and may remove participants from the program in accordance with its terms of use. A link to the Smithsonian's terms will be posted in the chat for your reference. Closed captioning is available. Just click the closed caption button on your screen and captions will appear. If you have a technical issue or a question unrelated to today's discussion, please use the raise your hand feature or type it in the chat box and a Smithsonian staff member will assist you. At Smithsonian Affiliations, we partner with museums and cultural organizations across the country to support them and their communities, people like all of you joining us today, while also furthering the Smithsonian's mission, the increase and diffusion of knowledge. Like the Smithsonian, our affiliate partners are committed to education and public service and work in collaboration with the Smithsonian to catalyze critical conversations in their communities and help us all better understand the world around us. This work seems more important now than ever before as we, like all of you, grapple with so many big issues, including the effects of a global pandemic, racial injustice, and of course, political divisiveness. Today's program is a great example of the ways in which the Smithsonian and our affiliates work together to bring thought-provoking and relevant content to audiences like you. With the help of affiliate organizations from Maryland to Washington State and from Iowa to Arizona and points in between, we're able to bring this program to many more people than we could with an in-person program in Washington, D.C. And perhaps most exciting for us, we're able to start a conversation not with one community, but across many. Smithsonian Affiliations is pleased to host today's program in collaboration with the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. This program is inspired by quadrennial talks by the curators in the museum's Political History Division, whom you'll meet tonight. And we're so pleased that a talk usually shared internally only with Smithsonian colleagues can now be shared with so many more. In addition, the museum's exhibition about political history entitled American Democracy, A Great Leap of Faith is currently on view in Washington at the Museum of American History and is also traveling through the Smithsonian Institution Traveling Exhibition Service. The exhibition is currently on view at History Colorado in Denver and will travel in January to the Heinz History Center in Pittsburgh. Both of those museums are Smithsonian affiliates. Now, I am delighted to welcome and introduce our featured speakers, all of whom are curators in the National Museum of American History's Division of Political and Military History. Lisa Kathleen Grady researches how Americans, and particularly women, have found their public voices and wield political power. She recently curated the exhibition Creating Icons, How We Remember Women's Suffrage, and was a contributing author to the book Smithsonian American Women. John Grinspan studies how politics and popular culture grow up together in America and how throughout the 1800s, American political campaigns have blended government and entertainment, youth culture and saloon culture, crime and comedy, and so much else. And Claire Jerry specializes in political rhetoric and presidential history. She is currently working on a social media campaign, #VoteHistory, to share campaign stories and artifacts virtually. As attendees in this program, we encourage you to follow this hashtag online. So we've asked each of our colleagues to start us off by sharing their favorite objects from the Smithsonian's campaign collections, one old and one fairly recent. Afterwards, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. Now I'm pleased to turn it over to Lisa Kathleen.
Good evening. I love that in Zoom, I'm talking to, I'm with all kinds of people who I can't quite see. It makes it kind of magic and special. So good evening. We were asked, as they said, to choose two objects, one old and one new, to talk about. And I decided to go a little off kilter when I chose mine. So I've picked one that is one of the earliest campaign, not really campaign, it's inaugural, because George Washington didn't have to run for president. He was lucky enough to be selected to be president. But a souvenir from his first inauguration really ushers in the world of campaign material that we're familiar with. And those are buttons. So this is a souvenir button from George Washington's first inauguration in 1789. It's made of brass. It has a little hasp on the back so that you could either pin it to your clothes or sew it to your clothes. And you could buy entire sets of these to button down your coat or button down your waistcoat to show your support for the new president of the United States. Because swag is being sold since the beginning, and it is a way for people to participate. It's a way for the common man, the common woman who won't be a part of being on the platform, who isn't being sworn in, and who isn't one of the movers and shakers of an inauguration or a campaign. It's a way for you to identify with the campaign. It's a way for you to show your support of the candidate. It's a way for you to find the people who agree with you, who are wearing the same button as you. It's maybe a way for you to avoid the people who are wearing an opposite button of you that you're not really prepared to talk to today. We get asked a lot if buttons are going the way of the dodo. Now that in a digital world, and now we have all the stickers, are buttons still important? And I always think, yes, buttons are still, they're not thrown off the back of cars anymore, trucks anymore during campaigns, but they are the first thing that people buy. Everyone buys, now you can go to the website, you can buy the button for your candidate, and it's the first thing you stick on your jacket, you stick on your t-shirt to show that you are supporting this person. It's a non-confrontational way of showing support, but it's a proud way, and it's something that you can move from piece of clothing to piece of clothing so that you can represent your candidate. And these were sold to crowds. You could order them and you could buy them at the inauguration for the celebration in New York of the inauguration. And it said that a set of these buttons were given as a gift to George Washington. Now, some of them actually had George Washington's initials. Now, we know that the general would never have been able to handle wearing his own name. He would have thought that that was very bumptious and conceited. So the new president, wore a set that were brass and that had what was called the chain of states. So all of the states, their names were in little circles surrounding the edge of the button. And that was what he wore. But a very popular version was this with the eagle, the symbol of the United States. And that this was a memorable occasion to be marked, to be remembered, and that you now had a souvenir for the rest of your life. And I like to think that these buttons really start the campaign. They really start the history of material culture in campaigns. Now, you can blame 1840 and the Harrison campaign for the, hard cider and log cabins. You can blame that for all of the rest of the swag that we have, because that lets in China teapots and ribbons, and all kinds of other souvenirs that you may have. But buttons, the oldest buttons, moving from real clothes buttons to pinback buttons, and now to the sort of safety pin style that we have now, and even the stickers that mimic buttons that we can wear and dispose of, and are much cheaper to print and give out, are still a part of campaigning. So I wanted us to start with that, and just, think of a little praise for the humble button that started it all and that is still a part of all of our campaign lives. And then the next piece I chose, now modern's a relative term to an historian. I like to think of these as modern, but in reality, they're from 1964. So they're just a little bit younger than me. And I am originally from Texas, so Lady Bird Johnson is one of my favorite first ladies. And as we know, first ladies have always been a part of political campaigns. From the 19th century, first ladies were, a decorous part of campaigning, but they've always been a part of campaigning. Melania Trump was speaking today in Pennsylvania. So first ladies are still, and first lady candidates, Jill Biden is also on the road today, have always been a part of promoting the presidency and the candidacy of their spouses. And whistle-stop campaign tours were one of the things that first ladies in the 20th century, the things in which they participated. Lou Hoover said that she liked them because her husband did the speaking and she just got to accept the roses. A big part of Truman's whistle-stop campaigns was that right at the end, he would say that, do you want to meet the boss? And Bess, who was very a little shy of being in the public, would come out with him to the end of the train and would wave to the crowds. It was a very popular moment. It was also apparently the signal for the photographers to get back on the train. So there are not that many pictures of Bess and Harry together on the end of the train. But my favorite whistle stop is a solo whistle stop. It's the first one made by a first lady. And Lady Bird Johnson took a swing, a 4-day train trip on the Lady Bird Special from Alexandria, Virginia to New Orleans, Louisiana in the summer of 1964. And she did this because, of course, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 had been signed by Lyndon Johnson. And the Democrats felt that they were in risk of losing the South. And Lady Bird Johnson, relying on that special charm that she knew, no Southern gentleman could refuse to greet and politely receive and speak with a Southern lady. So she took a solo trip through the South, stopping in various cities to speak, inviting the local politicians, the mayor, the representative from that area onto the train with her, knowing that they were pretty much going to have to accept her invitation. And she would speak to crowds. And this was a very brave thing to do. There were any number of people who were not happy about Johnson's signing of the Civil Rights Act. She went to these places. Sometimes she was heckled. People booed her, which was a new experience. And Mrs. Johnson would let people have their say. And then in that wonderfully polite way of hers, ladylike way of hers, say, "You've had your say. Now, of course, I know that you will be polite and let me have mine." And she talked about her pride in being a Southerner and the things that the South had contributed to our nation. And she talked about the fact that things change and that it was time for the South to make some changes. And she spoke in support of civil rights and made sure to emphasize that civil rights, as she had seen through her time passing through the United States, were not simply a Southern problem. They were a problem nationwide, and they were a problem that had to be solved. And she won, as can be expected, she won some converts, didn't win over everyone, but people admired the courage that she showed in making this trip by herself and speaking to sometimes hostile audiences. And the trip itself made a great amount of swag. So this is a ribbon, obviously, from the welcoming committee that would have welcomed Mrs. Johnson to a particular city, the postcards that you could mail along the way. And you can see it's tracking, okay, bad unintentional pun. It's tracking from Alexandria to New Orleans. And something you would not see much of now, matchbooks, all decorated with pictures of the Lady Bird special. And this is only a small part of the Lady Bird special material we have in the collection. My favorite piece is a menu from the dining car. We have paper cups. We have just everything you can think of, because just like the campaign itself, it produced its own amount of material. But the thing that I love the most about it is that it shows the power of the candidate's, what can be the power of the candidate's wife. It shows the bravery of a woman who's about to put herself in a precarious public position, and how the First Lady can be used as, can function as the president's partner and speak in ways that maybe he can't, and go to places that he can't to spread the word. So we should, think about that over the next few days as we're watching the First Lady and Dr. Biden move through the country trying to win voters for their husbands. And now I am going to hand over to John Greenspan, who's going to take us back a little further in time to the 19th century.
Okay, I'm assuming you can all hear me. Thank you, Lise, for passing off to me. I'd never even seen those objects. One of the amazing things about working at the Smithsonian is the incredible objects you get to see from your colleagues outside of the building. We're still learning what's in the collection. So that's really exciting to learn about. I thought I'd talk a little about the process of collecting tonight. About 5 years ago, in the small town of Milford, New Hampshire, some curators in the Milford Historical Society were going through their attic, and they happened across the object you can see here, this beat up piece of muslin. And at first they didn't know what it was. It was kind of crumpled up, and it was stuffed in this attic with all these other objects and poles and things that they thought were maybe garbage and they could use as storage space. But they got kind of wondering about what wide awakes were, what 1860 meant, what that eye symbolized. And they started digging, and they realized that the museum, the Smithsonian, has a collection of wide awakes objects and a longstanding interest. And so they sent us an email, and it's the kind of email as a curator you just wait to get in your inbox. Just incredible to see, because I've spent years and years, and we've all spent years studying this wide awakes movement, which was a movement of young men in the 1860 election to help get Abe Lincoln elected and to fight the extension of slavery. It was a movement among Northerners, usually in their teens and 20s, who banded together, put on capes, hats, and marched at night with torches and torchlit rallies to show their commitment to the Republican Party and to fighting the extension of slavery. It was really striking and unique. It was a moment of introduction of youth politics, probably the most important youth politics movement in American history, because they really helped elect Abe Lincoln and bring about the Civil War. And they were quite iconic. They had the symbolism of the open eye, and they marched in these capes. And in the whole country, there's probably 10 or a dozen of those capes surviving from a movement that had hundreds of thousands of members back in 1860. And one happened to spend 100 years in its attic in Milford, New Hampshire, and was just unearthed in pretty good condition. I mean, it had spent the last century surviving New Hampshire winters and summers, and so that can be damaging to an object. But considering how rare they are, it's in exceptionally good shape, and it documents a lot of the different aspects of the wide awakes. It says the name of the movement. It says 1860, the year it's used. It has the iconography of the open eye which would sit at the chest, because this would hang over one's shoulders. And the eye symbolizes the fact that the movement is wide awake to injustice in society and to the slave power. So it wrapped everything up together. And we began to work with these incredible curators in Milford, and we paid 4 visits to their historical society over the next couple of years before collecting these objects. And one of the other objects that's not pictured here, but is just as moving, I think, these capes were worn during torchlit marches. And along with this cape, they found a wooden pole that was meant to be attached to a torch. And on the pole were written the numbers 1860, 1864, 1868, 1872, all the way every 4 years up till 1904. We weren't quite sure what it was, but we realized these were the election years. These were the owner of this object, a young man named George P. Holt, who lived in New Hampshire, marched for 40 years, 44 years in every successive election, wearing his cape, lighting his torch, turning out for democracy, starting as a young man until he's quite elderly by the end of his run. but consistently participating in American democracy. And so we were fortunate to collect this cape and that torch, and it helps us tell the story of youth engagement in politics and innovation, and also how moments of political divisiveness are passed over sometimes. I mean, this cape was initially worn right before the Civil War. This cape and the torch and the man who owned it marched in the Civil War. The man, George Holt, fought in the Civil War and went on to participate in democracy for the rest of his life. So it seemed like a very cool story of kind of succession and continuity of American democracy to us. And collecting it was just a joy. Can we move on to the next subject, please? So this is a little more recent. Many of you probably remember in 2016 and this year, Bernie Sanders run for a nomination for the Democratic Party. And in 100 years, we might not remember Bernie Sanders as well as he kind of lives in our memory right now, and his movement and how significant it was for many people. Well, Lisa and I went to the Democratic Convention in 2016 in Philadelphia, and standing in the pouring rain, the protesters outside the convention was this man, you can see him in the bottom right-hand corner, a man who'd come from Denver to protest in support of Bernie Sanders. He put all his money into his trip from Denver. He had no idea how he was going to get back from Philadelphia to Denver, but he had his umbrella with him, and he'd written on it and drawn on it the symbols, Bernie's hair, and some of his slogans and imagery, all these causes that were meaningful to him in 2016. And as I was talking to him, it began to pour. It was July in Philadelphia, and there were a few really hard thunderstorms. And his object that I was eyeballing for adding to the national collection became an umbrella, and he had to use it to protect himself from the rain. You can see some of the streaks there from use. It just got me thinking about these objects that have a life, that they become museum pieces for us, and in 100 years, hopefully they'll tell an important story about this moment and this man's commitment to democracy. But it's also an umbrella that this guy used to keep the rain off his head in July in Philadelphia. So I love this object. Collecting it was a joy. The man who created it was reluctant to give it up to some guy from the government, but when he learned that it would be in the collection with Lincoln's hat and Teddy Roosevelt's objects, he wanted to give it over to us. So all our objects have kind of personal backstories like that. And this umbrella and that cape, to me, just help connect the individual creation of an object in everyday life to its long life, hopefully its immortality in a museum. Thank you. And I am done, so we can move on to Claire.
Thanks, John. I am going in a slightly different direction than either Lise or John went. And I probably have a little bit more whimsy in the stories I'm going to tell you today. Thank you to all of you from the affiliate museums. And it's really great to have such a nice geographic spread of people to talk to today. And it really is maybe one of the few silver linings of this event, that we can all be together in this environment. Well, when we were each asked to pick an older object, of the three, I think I have the newest old object. As you can see on the screen, this is from the campaign of 1896, when the Republican candidate was William McKinley and the Democratic and populist candidate was William Jennings Bryan. Now, I love this particular object, maybe because it's particularly odd. And I've had colleagues say, but Claire, it is so creepy. So maybe it's a good object for this week as we're headed toward Halloween. But you're probably thinking that it doesn't look like a typical campaign object. It doesn't have the colors you expect to see. It doesn't look particularly patriotic. So what is really going on here? And you might at this point be going, but what am I even looking at? What you are looking at is a piece of soap. It's about 4 inches long. They were not produced by the campaigns. They were produced by soap companies like the Jergens Company. Each piece of soap came in a box with one of the two candidates' names written on it and a tag around the neck of this little 4-inch long naked baby. Now, the words on the box and on the tag happen to be about economic policy. Economic policy was the #1 issue in the campaign of 1896. And I don't know, I like to say to people, you know, nothing says economic policy to me like a 4-inch naked baby made out of soap. I mean, what is really going on here? And the answer really, I think, is technology. In 1896, we really had an explosion of campaign novelty items, campaign artifacts. And a lot of it had to do with technology. Celluloid had been invented. The pinback button that Lise referred to really starts to appear in its own in 1896. There were toys, there were games, there were watches, there were smoking items, there were hats, and almost all of it would look very familiar to you today. The buttons of 1896, except for the candidates having a different name, they're the same color, they're the same shape, they look a lot like the buttons you see on the street today. People still have games, they still wear hats. One thing you won't still see is the soap baby. And I think the answer again is technology. That technology here in this case had to come from the soap manufacturers. That they were convincing people that look what we can now do in the manufacture of soap. Up until about 1890, soap had really just come in flakes. And now the manufacturing was saying, look, we can make shapes. And if you could make a human shape out of soap, you could probably make anything. So they were really more promoting the manufacture of the object than they were the candidates themselves. A lot of them were produced. There were thousands of campaign artifacts produced in 1896, but it turned out that these were not particularly popular with voters. Voters thought they looked a little too much like babies in coffins, and so they didn't really catch on. There are a lot of them still available. If you go to those places where they sell old campaign memorabilia, there are a lot of soap babies still out there in the world. And I like the story because it is so unusual, but I like the idea that campaign merchandise is not always just about politics. Sometimes it's about manufacturing. Sometimes it's about a particular issue. And today, of course, we're still talking about economic issues, maybe not the gold versus the silver standard, but a lot of what's happening here tells us a lot about campaigning from 1896 to the future. Let's look at the new object that I brought today. Again, I think I have the newest of the new objects. This is 2016, but I think this object is about 2 months newer than John's umbrella. My background, as you heard earlier, is particularly with an interest in campaign rhetoric and campaign speeches and communication. So I love to think about the big events of campaigns and the speeches that go on there. So I particularly like to think about debates. I was a debater myself in high school and college, and I'm fascinated by what happens in the debates that we've been having in this country since 1960. And since 1988, the campaign debates, presidential and vice presidential, have almost all been held on college campuses. 1988 was when the Commission on Presidential Debates was founded, and they moved the debates from big civic arenas onto college campuses because it was a way to encourage young engagement, like John was just talking about. It was a way they could tie to a lot of programming that colleges and universities would offer. And so almost all of them have been held on college campuses since 1988. This, as I said, is a 2016 artifact from Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia. Longwood hosted the 2016 vice presidential debate. Now, again, this doesn't necessarily look like a typical campaign object. Colleges and universities for these debates produce things you would expect. They produce programs and tickets and lanyards and media passes and things like that. And we collect those from the debate sites. But colleges and universities also recognize that these debates are a great opportunity for them to talk about themselves to their stakeholder groups. So they use the debates to talk to potential students. They use the debates to talk to donors of various types, to talk to their local communities about being engaged with the campus. And so they produce things that say something about their particular campus. So for example, the University of San Diego produced material that had their famous clock tower in almost every image. Centre College in Danville, Kentucky, which has hosted 2 vice presidential debates, has a very famous glass blowing program. And so they produced a commemorative art glass paperweight to celebrate their campus. Now you're going, well, what does this object have to do with Longwood University? Now, you may think that it looks like a donkey. That is in fact what I thought the first time that I saw it. So I assumed there would be a comparable elephant to this bobblehead. This is a bobblehead that's about 8 inches tall. And it turns out that Elwood is not a donkey, Elwood is a horse. And Elwood is the mascot of Longwood University. So they took their mascot, made him into a bobblehead, put him in an Uncle Sam suit, and put him behind a podium, almost looking like he's ready to jump in to the vice presidential debate and participate. It was a very fun way to commemorate their campus. The same time they sent me this bobblehead for our collection, they also sent a scarf. And again, I had to ask them, the scarf had Longwood University, it had the symbol of the debate and of their campus. And I said, but why a scarf? And it turns out that Longwood University it's a longtime campus tradition to produce a scarf for special events that happen on campus. So even though the debate was in October and people probably didn't need a 6-foot-long muffler at that time, it was part of their campus tradition to produce this memorable item. And I was very, very excited when they sent it to the collection. Hofstra University has put on 4 different presidential debates, and they often encourage their student organizations to put on events like inviting bands to come and have a special concert or comics. And they have sent us posters to commemorate how they were having their students get engaged on campus through the debates with other type of fun events that students like to have. This year's debates, of course, have been very different for the campuses where they've been held. So I'm really looking forward to it. We're already in conversation with those campuses, and I'm looking forward to see what we will have in the national collection in the future to commemorate this year's presidential debates. And so that brings us up maybe to the present, which might be a good transition to turn it back over to Tricia.
Thanks, Claire, and thanks to Lisa, Kathleen, and John as well. It was great. There's a fun comment from Kelly in the chat. Claire says, if I were a student at Longwood, I would be all over that bobblehead. I think particularly knowing that it's in the national collections too. And I think I want to ask sort of some general questions that we can get input from all of you on, but before I go there, John, there is a question from Katie in the chat about the cape that you showed. And she asked if those capes were in any way a precursor to the KKK outfit. She said they sound eerily similar. I don't know if there's any connection there.
There isn't. I often get asked that. It's a very reasonable question. Back in the 1800s, the way almost every party ran a campaign from the Wide Awakes from 1860 on was you got a bunch of guys, you put on capes, you lit torches, and you marched down Main Street or through the town square. It was kind of regardless of the party, regardless of whether they were abolitionists or secessionists or whomever, that was really how you campaigned to kind of rile up the base and get out the vote. When the KKK emerges in 1866 after the Civil War, they do borrow some of this symbolism, but it's in a much larger culture where it's what everyone is doing for almost every campaign cause across the board for a political party for a whole lifetime. So really, no, it's just that was kind of how people expressed themselves politically back then. And you have to, when you see those capes, you have to imagine being in a small town at midnight and seeing thousands of people wearing them, marching through the town square, yelling slogans for Abe Lincoln, waving torches. It really, for a lot of people, it's just the most exciting thing they're going to see in their lives. So it was really compelling to see. Great,
thank you. So Peggy is asking in the chat kind of the first question I was going to ask of you all, which was, how do you collect these materials? You know, where do they come from? Do you seek them? Do they seek you? You know, how does that all work?
I'd say we're shameless beggars. And things come in a variety of different ways when we go out and collect. A cape is an example. John and I were in Philadelphia, as he said, in 2016. And one of my favorite pieces collecting from a delegate in 2016 was a cape that she had made. And she called it her superhero cape. And it was the Hillary Clinton campaign symbol with the H. And she was wearing it as a superhero cape. And to me, it was interesting, not only because it related to the 19th century capes, but because it related to women's suffrage capes. Shamelessly stalked her through the arena. It caught my eye, and I followed her around and finally was able to get close enough to her to introduce myself and give her a business card and tell her that I was very interested in the piece that she was wearing. I knew she couldn't give it to me then because she needed it to get through the convention, but would she please think about the Smithsonian Institution? And the amazing thing that all three of us have found is that the Smithsonian is loved. and people will, with like the umbrella, like the cape, will, part with something to make it a part of the institution that they love. And it's a wonderful thing for us.
Thank you. And then I feel like our audience in the chat is just, putting in all the questions that I had to ask you, which is really fantastic. It means we're all kind of interested in the same things. How have you all handled collecting this election cycle during the pandemic and when conventions were virtual? What has that been like?
I guess I'll start there. I wasn't with the Smithsonian yet, and so didn't get to go with John and Lisa in 2016. But this year, John and I went to several of the primaries that had already happened before the pandemic started. So we were on the ground in Iowa and New Hampshire. I had been in South Carolina a couple of times. And we were really in the swing of it. And then almost overnight, as everybody on this call knows, that all came to a halt. And so we were having to find new ways to, because the primaries were still going on, the conventions were coming, debates have happened. And so we're trying to find creative ways of doing that. Sometimes we're watching the same news feeds that everybody's watching. And so we're trying to get an eye for, happening in certain places where there are rallies or primary speeches. And we asked before, do we go to them or do they come to us? And the answer is really both and, in the sense that when we find something, like Lisa talked about the cape that she saw, we contact people, but people are also very willing to contact us and say, either in the moment, I was just at this event, I was just at this convention, are you interested in this? And that's also how we still continue to collect from previous elections, that people find artifacts in their own home or they're cleaning out their grandparents' house and they find things and they contact us as well. So we really are still able to do both of those things.
I would add to that. I think we're noticing an interesting tension in collecting this election, which is that on the one hand, as curators, we know that everything is ephemeral. Anything we don't get could disappear. And some of our best collecting happens at the dumpster, after a protest or whatever, or walking down the National Mall after a big rally, objects that are just going to go away. And part of us says, get the objects now because they might not be here tomorrow. On the other hand, we're historians. We're still collecting objects from 1860 and 1789. And everyone knows 2020 is a historical moment. So a historic moment. So we know that over the years, things we don't get today will trickle in. So I think we have to remind ourselves of both those things, kind of push ourselves to collect what we can now, and also remind ourselves that in 2025 or 2030, we'll still be tracking down really fascinating stuff from 2020.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I mean, that the cape that you show, John, is a great example of that, right? Like that was still around for you to collect. So Kelly asked in the chat, a lot of the objects that you showed tonight seemed like they were created just by regular people, not by the campaigns themselves. But, and I just lost the question. Hold on, let me scroll up because there's more coming into the chat. So I just lost it. So has an organized campaign ever deliberately tried to create something that ended up being a big flop or that backfired?
Some babies weren't that successful, but they create them. John and Lisa and I have been talking about slogans that have worked and slogans that haven't worked in the past. And so sometimes you can see like the I Like Ike slogan was everywhere in 1952 and 1956 for Dwight Eisenhower, and other slogans over time that have been a lot less memorable. What's that one that you had, John?
Oh no, the Polk one.
Yeah.
We poked you in 44 and we'll pierce you in 52. Franklin Pierce and James K. Polk, Democratic Party. Not their best.
Well, or what was when again in 2016, Jeb, just name the exclamation point, because you don't want to do Bush, you're the third Bush in. And it seems like it'd be really cute, and it didn't quite work. It's an easy thing to poke fun to poke fun at. But John, remember the headquarters that had in headquarters while we were in New Hampshire. And you got to come up with not only ways to communicate to the public outside, you got to come up with ways to keep your staff and your volunteers engaged. And so for people who would visit, were either working or would visit the campaign headquarters, they'd cut out of construction paper a whole series of red exclamation points, like were on the sign. And they were distributing them to people to write messages to each other, to the candidate on, and stick them up on the wall. So they were really working that imagery hard, and it just didn't quite catch on, but was popular within the campaign.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
I was going to agree with that. And I guess another example is in the 1800s, young people were often very involved in politics. The Wide Awakes are a good example of that. Around 1900, the political parties say, young people are the answer. We need to organize our young people. And they create separate youth clubs and societies where only people under 21 could join. But the reason people were joining to begin with was they wanted to feel like they were involved with something adult and important. And when they got shunted off to the kids' table, their turnout and their engagement just flopped. So sometimes you can over-organize or over-plan a campaign.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Are there things that you choose not to collect, either because you don't feel like they're important, or anything that might be like too fringe or offensive, or too hard to preserve?
Certainly the too hard to preserve can be an issue. We have a lot of posters in the collection, and we love them because, going back to that previous question, they are often, posters can be mass produced, and obviously campaigns do mass produce posters, and signs and things like that. But we also love to see the posters that people make for themselves to reflect their own issue or why they're particularly passionate about this candidate. As people have gotten more creative in their poster making, sometimes they've added a different type of poster board, like a foam board, which is what we call an inherent vice. It breaks down really easily. Or they will glue things to the Roosevelts, for example, often used sort of rose imagery. Well, if you glue a big rose to your poster, it's likely to fall off and it's harder for us to store. So we do have to be aware of the longevity of certain types of things.
In terms of, I'm assuming what you're asking is some of the less than salubrious slogans or merchandise that comes out. And that is, we try to document things that are being produced and used. So, we'll look at vendors make some things with some less than pleasant slogans on them. We look to see which ones are selling. We look to see which ones are actually worn by candidates, not are just being made, but are actually being used. And we do pick up some of them. The Smithsonian serves multiple purposes. And one of them is that we document each election for eternity, for history.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that everything we take in is going to be shown right now. It doesn't mean that everything will have a place on the floor where your child might walk through, and maybe the button that has some profanity on it is not what we want to have out right now. But we collect it, and there's a place for it. And so researchers 50, 100 years from now will be able to see some of this. Now, the flip side of that is, because there's so much photography now, some things we don't have to collect because it's been documented. You can see it in the photographs, you can see it in the videos. So if it's not something that we know is getting a lot of play and is being used, then we don't necessarily need to have a physical piece of it in the collection for everyone to know that it happened. So sometimes it's just a matter of, John and I walked a lot of streets having some lively conversations about whether we were going to go back to a vendor and pick something up, and did this have enough significance to outweigh the fact that we may never be able to display it. And it's all a choice, it's your best thought at the moment, and you hope you're making the right choice. But as John said, the fact that other people are buying these and collecting these means that 50 years from now, if we made the wrong decision, we'll be able to get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. I think that, I'm sure you guys always get the question about, I mean, just like we asked tonight, how do you decide what to collect? And like, there is no perfect recipe, right? It's your judgment. It's, you know, it's all those things. It's that sort of magic mix of everything you just talked about, Lisa Kathleen. So, and that the reason to collect is not only for things to go on display, that there are other reasons to collect just to preserve the historic record. So I think that's interesting to think about. We have some questions in the Q&A in the chat about collecting third-party candidates. Is that something that you guys look at?
Absolutely. Not every third-party candidate. Some years there are as many as 50. I've heard that there might be somewhere in the country this year 100 people on the ballot. I have not confirmed that across the board. So we generally are looking at third parties that have either acquired a significant percentage of the vote. So Teddy Roosevelt's Bull Moose Party in 1912, John Anderson, who had finished with 7% of the vote in 1980, and Eugene Debs, who ran on the socialist ticket 5 times, is a fairly prominent figure. Or a third party, sometimes there's a third party that in some way influences the dialogue of the parties. They have an issue that the major parties feel like they have to take on and sort of talk about. You have a number of third-party candidates reflected in the collection, not to the extent, because of course there's not as much campaign material produced for them typically, and they're not at some of these events. They're not at the conventions often, or they have a very small convention that's hard for us to get to. They very rarely participate in the debates, but I guess I'll give a shout out for our hashtag vote history. There'll probably be a Ross Perot artifact that pops up this week in his significant third party run in 1992. So we definitely keep our eye out on the third parties.
I also say third parties are a great way to break in young staff. That was my first collecting assignment in 1996, was to go to Ross Perot headquarters in Maryland because I lived in Maryland. So on my way in, I could go and do that. And I'm sorry, John, I interrupted you that meeting too.
Oh, no, it's okay. I think both these questions about third parties and what we don't collect get at, there's just a fire hose of political material out there. There's so much, and we all love this stuff, and we're fascinated by their history, and we're fascinated by the campaigns, and we have to do sometimes the unpleasant work of deciding what gets in and what doesn't. It's hard to say no to stuff because we love it all, but we know even the Smithsonian has limited resources and certainly limited space. So we're trying to look almost as time travelers. What is relevant from the past, what's meaningful in the present, and what will be comprehensible in the future? If you go to a museum in 100 years, will the object that seems so significant in 2020 still feel significant in 2120? And often they're little blips, especially in the way the media cycle is right now. Often there are things that seem meaningful for a moment and then will just disappear. And it's kind of on us to put on the time traveler hat and say, will this have meaning to people, to future generations of Americans? And I hope we get it right. It's a challenge.
It's something that's been interesting about this cycle because we can't rush out immediately and we're not at, we'll see something and we have a chance to talk about it, the three of us together, before we necessarily go out and get it and see if a week later it's still making a lot of sense or it has any resonance. Whereas if we can be in the same event, but we'll be in four, corners of a room and not be able to talk. So this is an interesting collecting experience for us, and there's some advantages to it, distinct disadvantages to it, but there's some definite communication advantages to it.
Yeah, that's interesting. It gives you a little bit, not a lot of perspective, but a little bit, and the opportunity to think about, what is meaningful for the national collections. We have a question from Lisa, who's asking, not you, Lisa Kathleen, but Elisa in the chat.
Oh, from Elisa.
Sorry, I saw you.
Did I type something without knowing it?
You did not. Who's asking about if there are collections of Native American candidates or tribal campaigns for tribal positions. Do you collect around anything like that, or do you know if the Museum of American Indian collects around those kinds of things?
We have, I know we have buttons from movements, especially the AIM movement in the 70s and like things like Free Leonard Peltier and all that. Campaigns, I don't know what objects we have for candidates.
think of I want to say we have some material related to Wilma Mankiller, but I'd have to look and see what it was. We tend to focus on national politics and for this purpose, the presidential election. So people who ran for president will find their way in. I mean, we don't even do that many Senate races because they're just too many. We can't cover everyone. So which ones do we pick and choose? So we tend to focus the collection on the presidential election, the national election, which everyone across the country can participate in at the same time. And that way we can get an idea of how that's playing out. We can talk about that on a national level at the National Museum. And we know that state and local museums are handling the things that are unique to their area. So there's a symbiosis to what we and all of our affiliates do. And we can reinforce each other.
Well, I was looking up to confirm a factoid that I wanted to share. There has been one vice president of the United States who self-identified as Native American, Charles Curtis, who ran with Herbert Hoover. And we do have some Hoover Curtis buttons in the collection. So I love that, John started with sort of the protest movements and those kinds of things, because although we're here tonight to talk about electoral politics, certainly protest movements influence electoral politics, and we collect all of those things. So we do keep an eye out on that, but we are, as Lise was saying, we're focusing on at the national level.
Yeah, and there was a related question from someone asking about other sort of campaigns like the Women's March and things like that, which yeah. So those are a little bit different than, you think of them separately from the presidential campaigns.
The way we organize the collection, although it all spills over into each other, because some of this has to do with how we store things. We think of those as different thematic entities, but we collect Native American protests and women's protests and all civil rights protests, basically anti-nuclear protest, anti-war protest, basically anything you can go on the mall and protest, or in areas around the country, we do collect that.
And actually that brings up one of the questions we have is about how and where do you store all this stuff?
Well, we have, there are storage rooms on site at the museum, and Political History has 2 reasonably sized storage spaces with a lot of cabinetry of different kinds that holds buttons and posters and documents and signs and, the delegation standards from the convention and clothing and capes. And we're, like most museums, we're getting close to bursting at the seams. And that's also why we're sort of judicious about what we bring in, because one of the people you have to explain what you're bringing into is the collections manager, who is in charge of finding space for everything. So it's definitely a team sport, collecting, and you have to think about all those things. Will it fall apart? Is there a space to put it? Is it too big to store? And we try and fit everything within that space. Museums are always trying to get more space.
Yeah, the beauty of this stuff is that it's physical and material and real, and you can stand in front of a George Washington button and be connected back to 1788, 1789. But the downside of it is it has to go somewhere. And the thing that makes it so fascinating to us and to so many people is also what makes it so difficult to find ways to keep it alive and give it the longest life possible in storage. Sorry, Claire.
Well, I think the 3 of us feel grateful to be political history curators because with the exception maybe of the Cape, we collect a lot of small things. I tell people, I specialize in small things that are 2 inches in diameter metal. So I can get a lot of campaign buttons in a cabinet. Our colleagues in other areas of collecting, people who collect in agriculture or work in industry who collect trains and tractors, they have a much more serious challenge than we do. We can almost always find room for 1 more button or 1 more poster, but we are, like everybody that has said, we have limited space, and so we have to be careful.
Kind of a related question, sort of the opposite end of the space spectrum, is Do you collect digital posts, and if so, how? And the other part of the question is, how did the internet and the rise of social media change campaigning?
This one is tricky. We don't currently collect posts. The museum has focused primarily for many, many years on material objects. We never collected radio ads or TV ads. And we haven't really collected the memes and tweets. At some point, maybe we'll move towards doing that really comprehensively. But for now, we've primarily focused on the material world of politics. But the material world reflects the impact of the internet and just the way people organize, the way people discuss, that kind of thing. So it's not absent from our collections, but we are not harvesting memes and tweets yet.
So we have about 5 minutes left. It's hard to believe that the hour is almost gone by. And I'm going to ask you each to think about what, in your view, is the most unusual object in the political or your election collection. And Claire, if you want to say it's the soap baby, that's okay.
I'll try to come up with another answer.
I'm going to go with a reasonably modern piece. Like the soap babies, vendors will put out something for each candidate. So they want to be able to sell to Republicans and they want to be able to sell to Democrats. And in 1996, one of the oddest things that came back from the vendors' tables at the conventions was a tear-apart doll. This was a Velcro doll wearing it was dressed as a boxer. And it had Velcro on its arms, legs, and head. And so you could tear off its arms and legs in frustration, and you could tear off its head. And you could buy it with various different heads. You could buy it with Bill Clinton's head. You could buy it with Pat Buchanan's head. You could buy it with, Hillary Clinton. You could buy it with every character from that election cycle, or you could buy it in sets so that you could have multiple heads, so that you could change them around with whoever was frustrating you or you wanted to take your aggressions out on that day. And so it's sort of multi-party insulting or multi-party comforting, but just a very strange kind of object and it was very popular. And that to me is one of the odder things that we have. It's sort of that movement from just an odd slogan to a little more of the vitriol of starting to creep in.
This might not be odd in the goofy sense, but I just think it's so amazing that it exists. We have Lisa mentioned the 1840 campaign, the hard cider and log cabin campaign of William Henry Harrison. And this is a campaign where the Whig Party organized its whole appeal around being kind of rural and backwoods and having a candidate who used to live in a log cabin. And marches throughout the country would have wooden log cabins on sticks, which they would march around town with, or on wheels, roll them through town. And we have this, it looks like it's made out of Lincoln logs. It's from 1840. It's a log cabin from a campaign like that. It's currently on display in the American Democracy Exhibition. And it's 180 years old. It looks like it could have been broken by anybody who handled it at any time in the last 2 centuries. It kind of wraps up a lot about how campaigning got going, and on the one hand, how it reaches so many people, and on the other hand, how it's so silly and pointless sometimes. It's just, every time I see it, I'm just in wonder and awe that it tells so many stories, and that it didn't get trashed or broken at any time in the last 2 centuries. So whenever I see it, I think it's just wonderful that it still exists. Wonderful in the sense that it fills me with wonder, some of these things that people have so carefully preserved,
Well, John and I should have flipped order, because I'm going to go now from John's sublime moment to a very ridiculous moment. I am attracted to the novelties and the toys. And we tend to think today, I think that when you think about Jimmy Carter, one of the images you think of Jimmy Carter is the peanut farmer, but also his smile. He was known for that. But he wasn't the first candidate who sort of got marketed around his teeth. Teddy Roosevelt in 1904 was marketed around teeth, and you could buy a whistle that you put the whole whistle over your mouth. So it looked like you had this giant mouth and you would whistle through it, and it was his teeth that you're supposed to be whistling through. And the toy is just fascinating to me. I always have tried to imagine what it would have looked like if someone had actually played with it. But as John was saying, the things that get kept, in addition to the whistle itself, we have some of the advertising that supported the whistle, and how, you can blow like Teddy, and you can make music like your candidate with this mouth whistle. So I think the toys are often a little on the odd side, especially when you think that they're created for children who aren't voting. So they're purchased by parents to give to their child to promote a candidate that the parent likes.
Well, I think those are three great examples to end tonight on. As always, we have many more questions than we have time, but I just want to thank Lisa, Kathleen, and John and Claire so much for sharing the wonderful stories, and clearly the just the enthusiasm you have for this work really comes through. And thank you to our affiliates, our partner affiliates, who have helped promote this program and share it with their communities. And of course, the affiliations staff for all of their behind the scenes support tonight. So thank you all. And I hope we will see you again soon.